Welcome to Inquiring Minds. I am Steve Harper, and with me, as always, is my amazing co-host Donna Carlin. Donna, how are you doing today?
I'm great and so pumped for our call today.
I am too. I'm excited. What are we talking about today?
So I thought we would talk about what's your inner dialogue? Like, are you aware of how much you criticize yourself and the caveats that we use, as to, well, we're not that good. So therefore, please excuse, how poorly I might do something, intimation,
Yep.
that kind of
I
thing.
feel like you've been eavesdropping at my office or something because I was introducing myself to somebody that came for a visit recently, and I called myself the CDG, the chief dumb guy, because I've hired so well for everybody else, that I feel like I'm not adequate, I'm not worthy. It's so halfway joking, but at the end of the day, it's kind of interesting that you bring this up because I think a lot of us actually have that tendency to devalue ourselves and maybe kind of put ourselves down a little bit when we're thinking about how we represent ourselves and around other professionals, around other people in important meetings, etc.
Self-deprecation is a defense mechanism. It's a way for us to say, um, please excuse us if we're not as good as you need us to be,
Uh-huh.
um, without saying it specifically. So it's the caveat before the conversation. It's, this person's better than me. You do it sometimes when you introduce me and talk about the two of us on the call. And what's amazing is the two of us is what brings that energy to the conversation. It's not
Yeah.
me,
Yeah.
it's both of us. And people remark on a regular basis the synergy that we have. That's because of what you bring to the table. So that's why I keep threatening to throw hockey pucks at you, except it would just bounce off my monitor. Think about how often we do it, though.
Yeah.
Think about even our signature when we send an email out on our cell phones. Please
Oh yeah.
excuse any typos because I'm typing with my thumbs or whatever it is.
I'm not a
Rather
good
than do a
speller. Yeah.
spell check, that's
Yep.
right.
Yep.
You could do a spell check, right?
Yep.
Like, we throw these caveats out, which in some ways limits our impact because people will remember how often we say these things about
Sure. Sure.
ourselves and what they're doing. If they're thinking, hey, Steve, you're amazing. Okay. Well, Steve's already said, I'm the lesser of the two
Yeah.
in this conversation. They're looking for it. They're going to look for why you're saying those things.
Yeah.
You don't want them to find things to validate it. Instead, you want them to come away from that conversation saying, Steve's an extraordinary human being, and I want to know more about him or work more with him or whatever it is.
Yeah, no,
So think about,
I think you're absolutely right. I think there are it becomes a kind of a like you said, a defense mechanism. It becomes a default way of sort of uh, representing yourself in conversation, and it can become a really bad habit. And I've noticed it in my own way. It's comical a little bit. At the end of the day, it's kind of defusing the tenseness of a potential interaction or conversation by sort of taking a little bit of poetic license or comedic license, I guess, by trying to put yourself into that box. But to your point, it's very valid in that that might be the one thing that people remember about you. It's like not all the great stuff that comes afterwards if they're not really paying attention, or if now you've switched their thinking so that all they're doing is looking for validation of what you said about yourself, then they may not be hearing all the great stuff that you're putting out there, and by and large, completely take all your momentum away.
it also goes to trust.
Yep.
Think about it. If you're, say, making a pitch, somebody's making a pitch to somebody to sell a service, a product, whatever it is, and they started off the conversation saying, that they're not the smart one in the room kind of
Yep.
thing. Why would they trust that what they're going to buy from you is the best that they could get?
That's a good point. That's a really good point. And I think it is something that, if you have this tendency to have this self-deprecating humor, you really have to kind of look at that and figure out, where and if it's at all appropriate to enter into any type of conversation, especially when you're trying to put your, honestly, I got to be on, share a kind of a quick story. I own a software company, right? And one of the things that we get told all the time is that we're not the prettiest looking platform, but we don't need to be, right? So I utilize that as an opportunity to sort of defuse a little, kind of, any tenseness about people as they're observing the software. And I tell people, hey, look, we may not win any beauty contest, but we're really good in the talent competition. And people have this tendency to kind of laugh a little bit, but it's a way of explaining the simplicity of our interface and the approach that we take relative to that. But I absolutely could see how that could come back to kind of bite me in the hindquarters, because now you've just put in the mind of a potential client, oh, everybody else looks a lot better, right? And if it's a lot better, maybe it is a lot better. And that's it's a valid point. I hadn't actually considered it relative to how we demonstrate the software, or sort of how we are kind of putting ourselves down to a certain degree, and how that could that could impact somebody's perception of the company or the product.
So instead of talking about that it's not pretty, how about focusing on the simplicity of it, which makes it work so well? And really look at that, like let them look at how simple and beautiful it really is because of how
Yeah.
well it works.
Yep.
And how do
Absolutely.
you just remove that, the statement about, we might not be the prettiest, but we win the talent competition. um, they're going to be looking at looks because you've put it on the table. I always say that everything you put on the table, especially at the beginning of a sentence, is what people filter things through. They will
Yeah.
always remember the first thing that comes out of your mouth. If the first thing that comes out of your mouth is a disclaimer because you don't think you're the smartest person in the room, for example, they're going to look for you to stumble. And
Yeah.
it's not going to be conscious, it'll be a subconscious thing.
It's a really
While at the
it's a
same
really valid
time,
point.
you could say, I surrounded myself with the best people in the world for this job, and that's my talent, is to
Yep.
bring in the best people to surround me so that we give the best possible product, service, whatever. It's not saying that you're the smartest, the dumbest, or whatever. What it's saying is exactly what you did. I brought in the best people for the job. Now listen to the difference.
It's a big one.
I'm,
Yeah.
yep, I surrounded myself with all these smart people, so I'm the dumbest person in the room. Or what I did was bring in the best people for the job, and that's who we're going to be dealing with.
Yeah,
What's the
absolutely. I could
difference?
see in that regard, in terms of how I've introduced myself around my team, you're starting off, with a negative, which, like you said, could impact how they view it, or trying to
Yeah.
look for that gotcha moment that says, yeah, that's true. You are the dumbest cat in the room, right? At the end of the day, you don't even have to go down that path when you say, one of my strengths, one of the great things I bring to the table here is that I've assembled, the Avengers of, software teams, or of organizations, the best, highest quality, talented people here that are going to be here to serve you and to take care of you, and are ultimately, the super, in a position to deliver a super outcome for you. And you've been able to completely circumvent, that other approach, which is, hey, don't listen to me, these are the smart people at the table, right? And now you've just actually set yourself at a higher level in the opinion of the prospective client or whoever you might be meeting with. So it's important, and we've talked about this too. The self talk, how that sort
Yep.
of comes out in ways, and in sort of in circumstances that you don't really expect, but because of our default behavior, if we're not looking at these things, we're not having these conversations. If there's not a great podcast show like Inquiring Minds to put it forward, people probably aren't thinking about, gosh, I really am kind of giving up all my power, or I'm working against myself or the outcome I'm looking for, just because, I'm saying something out of insecurity or just trying to be funny. Did I lose you?
That interesting.
So, so you
I'm
locked up right there. I didn't hear what your response was to mine, so I'll come back and edit that. But
no. What I was thinking was funny according to whom?
mm-hmm, exactly. Yep.
That's what's on my mind right now. Like funny according to whom? We might think that it's like a joking way of putting something forward when somebody's about to spend thousands, maybe millions of dollars, depending on what you're representing. Do they want any funniness
Yeah.
in the framing of what it is you're bringing to the table?
Yep. Yep. Well, and again, it kind of goes back to you've got to think about how you present yourself and why you do the things that you do. And that just requires that you take a deeper dive and look into how you present yourself. And if it is one of those things that you default to, much like this conversation is sort of bringing to the table for me, is is it necessary, is it a value, and is it true, right? And if you're saying things to sort of kick things out off in a conversation because you're insecure about the conversation, how can you better approach the conversation? How can you better prepare yourself so that you come across as an authority? And if you're struggling, right, to a certain degree to buy into what you want the rest of the world to see, that's exactly why people engage coaches, right? To help them navigate those waters of self doubt, help them understand some of the things that they're doing, behaviors, words, languaging, approaches, all of those things. You really need somebody to help guide and direct you to kind of retrain and reapproach every opportunity. So I think this is a phenomenal topic.
Yeah, to go into your inner dialogue and ask yourself, what are you telling yourself? And what is the message that you're sharing with the world because of what you're telling yourself?
Yeah,
You
absolutely.
know,
Can you say that statement one more time, Donna? You locked up on that.
I'm trying. Um, what
I
is the
think.
question you want to leave yourself with? So, in other words, I always look at what is the question you need to ask yourself right now. We've talked about that. So,
Yep.
in this specific instance, is what do you want them to believe about you?
Yes. Yeah, that's a good one. Absolutely.
Yeah.
Well, and as we wrap up this episode, one of the suggestions I might make to our audience is go back and find our Tung Fu episode because that ties into a lot of what we're talking about. Your languaging, your approach. It's an excellent primer for the words that you use and ultimately how those words impact other people's perceptions of you. But this episode has been illuminating for me as they all are because I really end up kind of looking back through the lens of our conversation, and honestly this is not something I would have ever looked at unless you put it on the table, so thank you for that.
Oh, this was great. Thank you.
Well, so Donna, for those that are maybe new to the show or have been thinking about sort of getting a little more engaged and involved in the inquiring minds community, what's the best way for them to reach out to us, to connect, to keep the dialogue going, whether it be on this topic or any other episodes that we've done? How can they get engaged with us?
So we have our YouTube channel, which is Inquiring Minds with Donna Carlin and Steve Harper. And there's our Facebook group under the same name. Join us. Let us know what you want to hear. Let us know your thoughts, how this impacted you. We would love to hear from you. We hear a lot of around the edges comments. Be a part of the conversation. Make it public and let people see how this is helping you.
Absolutely. Yep. Well, we are so grateful for our audience, for those of you that are tuning into the podcast or those that are tuning in and seeing the video of Donna and myself on YouTube or on Facebook. We're just grateful that you're here and we want to, thank you for your time and your attention, and we're anxious to hear how these conversations kind of evolve out there in your own world, right? Amongst your own teams, your own community. So, let us know. We definitely appreciate that. And Donna, I'm excited for yet another conversation. These things are just amazing. Every time we get together, I learn something, and I'm so grateful for it. So, I hope you have a great day because this has been a highlight of mine.
You too. Take
All
care.
right. Take care.